Have you ever felt like life is unfair? Like the world just doesn't seem to give you a fair shot, no matter how hard you try? Meet Jamal, a young, ambitious, and brilliant teenager who's about to face something that could either break him or make him. This story, believe it or not, begins on a seemingly normal day at the airport. But as you'll soon find out, nothing about this day is ordinary. Jamal, a bright 16-year-old with dreams that reached far beyond his years, was on his way to a prestigious academic competition in another city. With his headphones on and a book in hand, he was ready to settle in for the long flight ahead. But what should have been a simple journey quickly took a drastic turn. What was supposed to be a routine boarding process escalated into something shocking when a flight attendant, for reasons Jamal couldn't understand, singled him out. He wasn't causing trouble, he wasn't being loud, and he certainly wasn't a threat. But somehow, he became the target of an unfathomable decision. The flight attendant kicked him off the plane. Jamal's heart sank as he was escorted off, confused and humiliated, leaving the other passengers staring in disbelief. What was going on? Why him? Jamal stood there on the tarmac, the plane doors closing behind him as the jet engines roared to life. The flight was already delayed, and the cold air bit at him as he tried to make sense of it all. How could a flight attendant treat him this way? Was it racism? Or was it something else? The confusion was overwhelming, but deep down, Jamal knew this moment would shape his life forever. What Jamal didn't know was that 11 minutes after being kicked off that plane, his entire world was about to change in ways he could never have predicted. This wasn't just about a flight attendant's mistake. This was about a system that had wronged him. A system that was about to learn the hard way that there are consequences to treating people like Jamal as if they don't matter. But this isn't just a story of revenge. No, what happened next was something far greater. A turn of events that would not only challenge everything Jamal had ever known, but also fit the entire power structure upside down. The tension was thick. The injustice he had suffered was more than just personal. It was about to become a massive story that would shake an entire industry. Now, with nothing but his drive and unshakable determination, Jamal is about to do the unthinkable. You won't believe what happens next. It's a twist you can't see coming. One that will leave you wondering, how did this young boy end up with so much power? And what will he do with it? Stay tuned. This is just the beginning. Jamal's mind raced as he stood there alone on the runway, watching the plane that had just rejected him disappear into the sky. The air felt colder now, as if the very wind was mocking him. He was used to facing challenges, but this felt different. He had always been the kind of kid who pushed forward, no matter what life threw at him. From the moment he was old enough to walk, he had been determined to prove that he was more than just another statistic. His mother, a single parent, raised him to believe in his potential. She worked 2 jobs, and despite their financial struggles, she always encouraged him to aim high, to reach for the stars. Jamal never wanted to disappoint her. Yet, here he was, being thrown off a plane like he didn't belong, like he wasn't worthy of the seat he had paid for. He could hear the whispers from the crowd of passengers who had watched the scene unfold. Some were sympathetic, while others seemed indifferent, perhaps unaware of the injustice that had just occurred. He wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but nothing came out. All he could do was stare up at the plane, his dreams of the competition slipping further and further away. The airline employees didn't offer any help. The agent at the gate told him to contact customer service and gave him a cold, mechanical apology, as if the inconvenience wasn't their problem. Jamal was left standing there, his phone buzzing in his pocket, a constant reminder that time was running out. He looked at the clock on the wall. The competition would start soon, and without being on that plane, he wouldn't make it. His future, the scholarship he was hoping for, it all seemed to be slipping through his fingers. He could feel the weight of disappointment settling in his chest, but there was something else too. A quiet rage, one that was burning deep inside him, slowly taking root. Jamal wasn't the kind of person to just let things slide. He was smart, resourceful, and persistent. Growing up in a tough neighborhood, he had learned early on that if you wanted something, you had to fight for it. He couldn't just let this moment pass. Not without standing up for himself, for everyone who had been unfairly treated or marginalized. But what could he do? He wasn't some rich businessman with connections. He wasn't a lawyer who could sue. He was just a teenager who had been humiliated in front of strangers. For a moment, Jamal considered leaving. Perhaps going back home and pretending like nothing had happened. But deep down, he knew that wasn't who he was. He couldn't turn his back on this. As he walked to the terminal, his thoughts became more focused. He pulled out his phone and opened a news app. He searched for anything about the airline. Surely, this had to be a bigger issue, something that others had experienced. But the results were mostly vague, nothing concrete. Still, Jamal wasn't the type to give up easily. He found a few articles that mentioned customer complaints about the airline, but nothing that could directly help him. He knew that in order to make a real impact, he had to find a way to expose this injustice to the world. He reached out to a friend, Marcus, who had a knack for social media and tech. Marcus was always telling Jamal that the power of the internet could change anything. "The world's your stage, man," Marcus always said. "You just got to know how to work the system." Jamal shot him a quick text, explaining what had just happened. Within seconds, Marcus responded with a barrage of questions, all of them practical and focused. What was the name of the airline? Did Jamal have any proof? Had he taken pictures or video of the incident? Jamal hadn't thought about that at the time. In the heat of the moment, his mind had been too clouded with disbelief and anger to pull out his phone. But it didn't matter now. Marcus was already on it. Within an hour, Jamal had a video uploaded to social media. A raw, unedited account of what had happened, featuring Jamal's face, his voice, and the clear injustice that had occurred. The footage wasn't perfect, but it captured the essence of the moment. The flight attendant had been dismissive and cold. The other passengers had been silent, but their uncomfortable stares were enough to tell Jamal that they knew something was wrong. The video went viral faster than Jamal could have imagined. It spread like wildfire across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Comments flooded in from people who had experienced similar incidents. From all over the country, people were coming forward to share their own stories of discrimination, of being mistreated by airlines and other large companies. Jamal's video had become the face of a much larger movement. The hashtag Justice for Jamal began trending. Everyone was talking about the boy who was kicked off a plane for no reason. A boy who had the courage to stand up and make his voice heard. But even as the video spread, Jamal's anger was still simmering beneath the surface. The airline hadn't issued any statements. There was no apology, no explanation. It was as if they were hoping the whole thing would just blow over. They were underestimating him, and he knew it. He wasn't going to let this go, not when so many people were depending on him to be their voice. Hours later, Jamal received a message. It was from an unknown number, but the tone was professional. "We need to speak," the message said. "The airline wants to resolve this matter privately." Jamal stared at the screen, his pulse quickening. Was this the moment when everything changed? Was the airline finally going to take responsibility? Or was this just another attempt to brush the incident under the rug? He wasn't sure, but one thing was for certain: they weren't going to silence him that easily. He called the number. The voice on the other end was calm, almost too calm. The person introduced themselves as someone from the airline's legal team. They spoke about compensation, about settling the matter out of court. But Jamal wasn't interested in money. He didn't want a payout. What he wanted was justice, and he wasn't about to back down now. He pressed for more, asking pointed questions about the flight attendants' actions, about the airline's history of discrimination, about how they were planning to address the growing outrage. The lawyer's tone shifted. "We're prepared to offer you a seat on the next flight," They said, "But we need you to be reasonable. We need to resolve this quietly." Jamal could feel the tension building in the pit of his stomach. He wasn't sure what they were hiding, but he knew there was more to this than just one flight incident. They'd wanted him to stop, to give up, to take the easy way out. But Jamal wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. With the pressure mounting, he made a decision that would change everything. He hung up the phone and stayed out the window, the quiet determination setting in. He wasn't going to let them control this narrative. If they wanted him to be silent, he would make sure the whole world heard his voice. This was no longer just about him. It was about everyone who had ever been mistreated. He wasn't just a boy with a grudge anymore. He was a force to be reckoned with. And so, with a single click, Jamal did something that no one could have ever expected. He didn't just share his story. He took control of the entire situation. What happened next would leave everyone stunned, and it was just the beginning. As Jamal sat in his small, cluttered room, the world outside felt distant. The phone in his hand was buzzing non-stop with messages, notifications, and comments from strangers, all echoing the same sentiment: support. But inside, he was conflicted. This wasn't about fame or recognition. This wasn't about going viral. This was about something much deeper. He felt the weight of the people who had backed him, the weight of those who'd been silenced their whole lives, the ones who had no voice but hoped that his would be loud enough. He wasn't just representing himself anymore. He was standing for something much bigger than he ever expected. Jamal had seen it before, the way certain people in power were quick to dismiss those they deemed unimportant. Whether it was a careless comment from a teacher or the way society looked at him because of his skin color, Jamal had always been aware of the biases that existed. But it wasn't until that moment on the runway that it became crystal clear. They had tried to silence him, just like they had tried to silence so many before him. But as the days passed, he started to see the magnitude of what he had stumbled into. He wasn't just an ordinary teenager. The story was bigger than his individual pain. It was about systemic discrimination, the kind that happened every day, but was rarely seen or called out. And now, because of his boldness, because of his refusal to back down, the world was paying attention. What he had once thought was just a personal injustice had become a platform, a stage for something far greater. Behind the scenes, the airline was scrambling. Their legal teams were on high alert, trying to figure out how to contain the fire that Jamal had ignited. They knew they couldn't just ignore the situation, especially after the viral video. Public relations teams were working overtime to craft the perfect response. They had to do something, but what? Apologizing would make them seem weak, and silence would only fuel the fire. The last thing they wanted was more media coverage. The executives had already begun discussing the options: compensation, rebranding, even the possibility of a settlement to make Jamal go away quietly. But every option seemed risky. They knew they couldn't let this snowball further, but none of them had any idea how far Jamal was willing to go. He had already shown them that he wasn't afraid. Meanwhile, Marcus, Jamal's tech-savvy friend, had been working behind the scenes too. He wasn't just helping Jamal amplify his story. He was digging deeper, unearthing connections that no one had thought about. The airline, he discovered, wasn't just any airline. It was a part of a much larger conglomerate, one that had its hands in several industries, all linked to powerful figures in government and business. There were whispers, rumors, and dark secrets buried in corporate files, things that could bring the whole empire crashing down. But Marcus knew how to play the game. He wasn't going to make a move until the time was right. He had been monitoring everything, from the airline's public relations strategies to the shadowy figures involved behind closed doors. The deeper he dug, the more he realized that Jamal's situation wasn't an isolated incident. There were patterns of discrimination, patterns of mistreatment that spanned beyond the airline. And Marcus was ready to expose them. Jamal, on the other hand, was starting to realize the impact his story was having. He'd always believed in standing up for what was right, but this was different. This wasn't just about a personal fight. It was a battle against an entire system that had been in place for years. The more people reached out to him, the more he understood how widespread the problem was. Messages flooded in from people all over the world who had experienced something similar: students, workers, travelers, all facing the same fight. They were afraid to speak out. They feared retaliation. But now, they were finding strength in Jamal's courage. Despite the growing support, there were still many who viewed Jamal as a threat. He could sense the unease from his own community. People who worried about the consequences of going public, who told him to back down before things got too out of hand. They were afraid of what might happen if he pushed too hard. Some even whispered that it wasn't worth it, that the airline would bury him in legal battles, drown him in a sea of paperwork, and break him down before he had the chance to achieve anything meaningful. But Jamal didn't want to hear it. He had come too far to turn back now. One evening, as Jamal sat at his desk, staring at his phone, a message popped up on the screen. It was from an unknown number. A message from someone claiming to be an insider at the airline. They had information. Crucial information. Jamal's heart skipped a beat. Was this the break he had been waiting for? He opened the message, and the text inside was simple yet loaded with potential. Meet me at 7 p.m. at the coffee shop on Main Street. I have something you need to see. It's bigger than you think. He wasn't sure if this was a trap, or if this was his opportunity to finally expose everything. But his gut told him it was worth the risk. The unknown person had referenced things Jamal had only heard in rumors. Things about how the airline had been using its influence to avoid scrutiny, how they had been involved in shady dealings, things that could change the entire narrative of the story. This was his chance to take the fight to another level. But would he be ready for what he was about to uncover? The hours leading up to the meeting felt like an eternity. Jamal couldn't stop thinking about what might happen. The suspense was killing him. He wasn't sure if he was walking into a trap, but he had to find out the truth. His phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a message. It was a call. The number was unfamiliar. Jamal hesitated before answering. Jamal, a voice on the other end said, calm but urgent. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. Jamal's heart raced. Who was this? How did they know about the meeting? You think you're just fighting for justice, but there's more at play here. Much more. If you go to that coffee shop tonight, you'll regret it. The voice hung up before Jamal could respond. Was this a warning or a threat? Either way, Jamal knew one thing for sure. Things were about to get a lot more complicated. Jamal's mind was racing as he paced back and forth in his room. The weight of the call still hung in the air, and every second felt like a countdown. The cryptic words lingered in his mind. If you go to that coffee shop tonight, you'll regret it. But who was this voice? Was it someone trying to protect him, or was it another person trying to scare him into submission? Jamal had no way of knowing, but his gut told him that the stakes were higher than he realized. Despite the warning, Jamal couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the verge of something massive. He'd been fighting so hard to expose the truth, to give a voice to those who'd been silenced, but now, as the night approached, the tension was almost unbearable. This was no longer just about one airline or a single flight attendant. It was about a system of power that had been built on manipulation, secrecy, and control. And Jamal was beginning to realize that the more he uncovered, the more dangerous this fight was becoming. His phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't just a message. It was a notification that a new article had been published online. Jamal clicked it open, his heart sinking as he read the headline. Teens viral video sparks national outrage. Airline responds with legal threats. The article detailed how the airline had issued a statement threatening legal action against Jamal and his supporters. They claimed that the video had been misrepresented, that it was taken out of context, and that their employee had acted within company guidelines. The message was clear. The airline was not backing down. And if Jamal didn't drop the story, they would use every tool at their disposal to ruin him. But what struck Jamal even more was a line buried deep in the article. It mentioned a powerful corporate lawyer who had been brought in to handle the case. A lawyer with a history of shutting down lawsuits and silencing whistleblowers. Jamal had heard of this lawyer before. They were known for their ruthlessness, and their connections reached far beyond the airline industry. This was not just a legal battle anymore. It was a war against someone with the resources to crush him. He knew he couldn't back down now. Not when the stakes were so high. Jamal had spent his whole life fighting for a chance, and he wasn't about to let a powerful corporation snuff out his voice. But what did it mean if he kept pushing forward? Was he walking straight into a trap? The clock ticked on, each minute dragging him closer to the meeting at the coffee shop. He had already made up his mind to go. He couldn't let fear stop him. He grabbed his jacket, making sure his phone was fully charged and ready to record anything suspicious. As he left his room, he sent a message to Marcus. *I'm going to the coffee shop. Stay on standby. Something's off about this, but I need to see it through. *. Marcus responded almost immediately. *. Be careful, bro. I don't like this, but I get it. Let me know what happens. *. The night was darker than usual as Jamal walked the streets, the wind biting at his skin. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching him. The streetlights flickered above him, casting long shadows along the empty road. Every footstep echoed in the quiet night, the sound amplifying the tension in his chest. The coffee shop was just a few blocks away now, and the closer he got, the more uneasy he became. When he finally arrived, Jamal paused for a moment outside the door. The familiar smell of coffee wafted through the air, but it didn't feel comforting. The place was mostly empty, with only a few customers sitting near the windows, their faces obscured by the dim light. He scanned the room, but there was no sign of the person who had reached out to him. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. He stepped inside and ordered a coffee, trying to calm his nerves. The barista gave him a quick smile, but Jamal's eyes never left the room, scanning every corner. He had no idea who to trust anymore. He was so focused on the people in the shop that he almost didn't hear the footsteps behind him. A voice broke the silence. "Jamal?" He turned to see a man standing at the counter, his face shadowed under the hood of his jacket. Jamal couldn't make out the details of his face, but something about the way the man looked at him told Jamal he was the one. "You're late," the man said in a low, calm voice. Jamal hesitated, unsure how to proceed. "You're the one who messaged me." The man nodded. "Come with me. We don't have much time." Jamal's instincts screamed at him to run, but the curiosity inside him was stronger. He followed the man to the back of the coffee shop, to a door that led into a small, dimly lit alley. The man pulled out a small piece of paper and handed it to Jamal. It was a map. "This," the man said, "shows you everything. What they've been hiding. You need to see this, Jamal. You need to understand what's really going on." Jamal's hands trembled as he unfolded the paper. It was more than just a map. It was a blueprint detailing a network of connections, shady dealings, and hidden agendas that stretched far beyond the airline. The deeper he looked, the more he realized how vast and dangerous the system was. The airline wasn't just a business. It was a cog in a much larger machine, one that controlled industries, politicians, and even media outlets. "This isn't just about an airline," the man said, his voice lowering. "This is about power. Power that you just started to uncover. They're willing to do anything to keep this hidden. You've already made a mistake by exposing them. But if you keep going, you're going to wake up a sleeping giant." Jamal's heart raced. What was he dealing with? What had he gotten himself into? His mind was spinning as he looked at the map, trying to process the web of connections before him. "Who are you?" Jamal asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm someone who's been trying to stop this for years, the man replied. And now, you're the only one who can do something about it. Before Jamal could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed in the alley. Someone was coming. The man quickly shoved the map into Jamal's hand and pushed him toward a side street. Go, he urged. They know you're here. Get out now. You've already made enemies, but you don't want to make them any more angry than you already have. Jamal's heart pounded in his chest as he glanced over his shoulder. The man had already disappeared into the shadows. Jamal stood frozen for a moment, feeling the weight of the situation. He was in deeper than he ever imagined, and now the stakes were higher than ever. He had uncovered something big, something dangerous, and he had no idea what would happen next. All he knew was that the clock was ticking, and if he didn't act fast, everything he had fought for could slip through his fingers. Jamal's mind was racing as he sprinted down the side street, clutching the map tightly in his hand. The adrenaline coursed through him, his breath coming in quick gasps as he tried to make sense of everything that had just happened. Who was the man? Why had he given him the map? And what was the deal with the airline's secret connections? It all felt like too much for one person to handle. But Jamal knew that he couldn't walk away now, not when the stakes were higher than ever. He turned a corner, his feet pounding against the pavement as he tried to put as much distance as possible between himself and the alley. His phone buzzed again, and for a split second, he considered ignoring it. But something told him he needed to know who was trying to contact him. It was a text from Marcus. Jamal. You there? Something's going down. Check your email. I found something huge. Jamal's heart skipped a beat. What was Marcus talking about? He pulled out his phone and opened his email app, his fingers shaking as he scrolled through the messages. There it was, a new email from Marcus, with the subject line *, the missing link. Jamal clicked it open and read the message. It was a simple sentence, but it hit him like a ton of bricks. The lawyer you're up against is more than just a corporate shark. They're connected to the airline's parent company, and the parent company is linked to a global syndicate that controls everything. A global syndicate. Jamal felt the ground beneath him shift. This wasn't just a fight against an airline anymore. This was a battle against an entire system that reached far beyond anything he had imagined. The deeper he went, the more he realized that the world he thought he knew was a facade, carefully constructed to hide the real power that controlled everything. But what stunned him even more was the next part of Marcus's email. He traced the lawyer's connections. You won't believe this, but I think your mom might be tied into it. She worked for a subsidiary of the syndicate, didn't she? Jamal froze. The words felt like a slap in the face. His mother had always been a strong, independent woman, someone who fought to protect her family. She had always kept her past private, but Jamal never expected it to be anything like this. Could it be true? Was his mother somehow involved in this dark web of corporate corruption and organized crime? His hands trembled as he read the message over and over, the weight of the revelation sinking in. Was it possible that his fight for justice had been intertwined with something his mother had been part of without him even knowing? Was he unknowingly challenging the very people who might have had control over his family's future all along? Just as Jamal's mind spun with confusion, his phone rang again. It was an unfamiliar number, but Jamal didn't hesitate. He answered quickly, his heart pounding in his chest. Jamal, a voice said, smooth but cold. It was the lawyer. I know you've been poking around, digging up things you shouldn't, the voice continued, each word dripping with a dangerous calm. You've made things difficult for yourself, boy. But don't think you can win this. This isn't just about the airline anymore. This is about the bigger picture, and you're about to learn the hard way that you're out of your league. Jamal's throat tightened. Was this a threat? Or was the lawyer trying to scare him into backing down? Either way, Jamal wasn't backing down. He wasn't about to be intimidated. I'm not going anywhere, Jamal said, trying to sound confident, though his voice betrayed his fear. I'm exposing everything. You can't stop me. The lawyer laughed, a low, menacing sound. Oh, I can, Jamal. I can stop you and everyone else like you. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Before Jamal could respond, the call ended abruptly, leaving him with nothing but silence. His mind raced, his thoughts spinning wildly. He was standing on the edge of something huge, something far bigger than he ever expected. But now, the line between right and wrong was beginning to blur. What if his fight was never about justice? What if he had been unknowingly fighting for a cause that was already controlled by the very people he wanted to take down? The more Jamal thought about it, the more the pieces seemed to fall into place. Could his mother have been involved in this syndicate all along? Was she the one who had been protecting him from the truth? Jamal shook his head, trying to push the thoughts aside. He couldn't afford to get distracted now. He had to keep pushing forward, had to finish what he had started. But the further he went, the more dangerous this journey became. The walls were closing in, and every step forward only led to more uncertainty. He took a deep breath and checked the time. It was almost midnight. He had to make a decision, and fast. The clock was ticking, and the forces against him were growing stronger by the minute. He could feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for everyone who had been silenced, for everyone who had been overlooked. But at what cost? His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video message from Marcus. Jamal, listen closely. Marcus said in the video, his voice frantic. I've uncovered something. Something huge. The airline's parent company. It's connected to something much darker than you think. I don't know how to explain it, but there are people behind this. People who will stop at nothing to bury the truth. And your mom, she's at the center of it all. Jamal's heart skipped a beat. What was Marcus saying? What had he uncovered? The video cut off abruptly, leaving Jamal staring at the screen, his mind racing. His mother. The syndicate. The airline. It was all starting to make sense, but the more it made sense, the more dangerous it became. Just then, the unmistakable sound of a car engine rumbled in the distance. Jamal turned his head, his pulse racing. Someone was coming. Someone who wanted him to stop asking questions. But Jamal was ready. He had come too far to back down now. He tucked the map into his jacket pocket and stepped into the shadows, his mind set on one thing. He was going to expose the truth, no matter the cost. But what if the truth was more dangerous than he ever could have imagined? Jamal pressed himself flat against the wall, his breath shallow, as the sound of the approaching car grew louder. The streets were empty, the dim light from the street lamps casting long, eerie shadows across the alley. He had to think fast. Whoever was coming knew exactly where he was, and Jamal's only option was to confront them head-on. He couldn't keep running. Not now. Not when he was so close. As the car came into view, Jamal's heart raced. It was sleek and black, a luxury vehicle that looked far too polished for the city's backstreets. The car slowed to a stop in front of the alley, its headlights briefly blinding Jamal. Then the engine cut off, and everything went silent. Jamal's fingers tightened around the map, hidden in his jacket. This was it. He had to make a choice, face whoever was in that car, or risk letting them silence him forever. With one last deep breath, he stepped into the street, his eyes locked on the vehicle. The door opened slowly, and a tall figure emerged, dressed in a sharp suit, their face obscured by the shadows. Jamal, the figure said, their voice smooth but cold. You've made quite a mess of things. Jamal's stomach churned. It was the lawyer, the one who had warned him to stop. But now, he wasn't alone. Another figure stepped out from behind the lawyer, someone Jamal instantly recognized. It was his mother. Mom? Jamal's voice trembled, his mind struggling to comprehend the scene before him. She didn't answer at first, her gaze shifting between him and the lawyer. Then finally she spoke. Jamal, I didn't want you involved in this. But you've pushed too far. His mother's words were a punch to his gut. Jamal's world seemed to tilt, and for a moment, everything went still. He had been right. His mother was connected to this shadowy syndicate. But why hadn't she ever told him? Why had she kept him in the dark for so long? The lawyer stepped forward, his gaze never leaving Jamal. You think this is about an airline boy? You think this is about some petty injustice? This is about control. This is about the system you've been blindly fighting against, a system that your mother helped build. Jamal's mind was spinning. The lawyer's words hit him like a wave, and his thoughts scrambled to piece everything together. His mother, the syndicate, the airline, it was all interconnected, and he had walked right into the heart of it. You're part of this, Jamal asked, his voice hoarse with disbelief. You've been helping them. His mother's face softened, but there was a hardness in her eyes, a part of her he hadn't seen before. I did what I had to do, Jamal. You don't understand. The world isn't black and white. The things we've done, they were necessary to keep everything from falling apart. Jamal shook his head, his hands trembling. I don't care about your reasons. People are hurting. I've seen it. The way they've been treated, the way the airline has covered up their mistakes. People like you have been pulling the strings while everyone else suffers. His mother's expression hardened. You think you can just expose the truth and make everything better. You don't know who you're up against. You're nothing but a pawn in a game much bigger than you. Jamal's fists clenched at his sides. He could feel the weight of everything crashing down on him, the truth slamming into him like a freight train. His mother wasn't just protecting him. She had been part of the very system he was trying to tear down. The people he thought he could trust, his own flesh and blood, had been complicit in the corruption. For a moment, Jamal was paralyzed. He had been fighting so hard to expose the truth, to bring justice to the people who had been wronged. But now it felt like the truth itself had betrayed him. How could he continue the fight when everything he thought he knew was a lie? The lawyer took a step forward, interrupting his thoughts. You don't have a choice, Jamal. You've seen too much. Now you either join us, or we bury you. Jamal's breath caught in his throat. The threat was clear, and for a moment, he considered the gravity of it. He could walk away. He could pretend none of this had ever happened, go back to his life, and forget the fight that had consumed him for so long. But deep down, he knew he couldn't. He couldn't live with the knowledge that he had let this machine continue to operate unchecked. The silence stretched between them, tension thick in the air. Before Jamal spoke again, his voice steadier than before. I won't join you. I won't be a part of this. His mother's face was unreadable, but the lawyer's smirk deepened. Very well. But you should know this. You've already made your choice, and now the consequences will be yours to bear. Before Jamal could respond, the lawyer snapped his fingers, signaling to someone in the car. The vehicle's door opened again, and a man stepped out, holding a briefcase. Jamal's pulse quickened as the man walked toward him, the briefcase in hand. The lawyer turned to his mother. Take care of it. The boy is more trouble than he's worth. Jamal didn't have time to react. His mother took a step closer to him, and in that moment, Jamal saw something he hadn't expected. A brief flash of regret in her eyes. But it was gone just as quickly as it had appeared. With one swift motion, she opened the briefcase, revealing a small device. Before Jamal could make sense of it, she pressed a button. In an instant, everything went dark. When Jamal came to, he was lying on the cold pavement, the night air still around him. His head throbbed, and the world spun as he struggled to sit up. The alley was empty. The car was gone. And so was his mother. The briefcase was nowhere to be seen. Jamal's heart pounded in his chest as he realized something had changed. He wasn't just caught in the middle of a fight anymore. He had become part of something far bigger, far darker than he could have ever imagined. He reached for his phone, his fingers numb as he checked for messages. But there was nothing. No call, no text, just silence. Then, his screen lit up with a new notification. A video. Jamal's hands shook as he tapped on it. The video began to play, and his breath caught in his throat. It was footage of him, footage of everything that had happened, from the moment he stepped into the alley to the moment he was knocked unconscious. But it wasn't just a simple recording. This was a message. A message from someone else. Someone even more powerful. The final twist hit him harder than anything else. Jamal had never been in control of this fight. The game had already been rigged from the start. Jamal stared at the video on his phone, his eyes wide, as he watched the footage unfold. It was him. He could see himself, lying unconscious in the alley. The lawyer had been right. He was nothing more than a pawn in a game far bigger than anything he had imagined. But what shook him the most was the face in the video. The one standing above him as he lay there, vulnerable. It was his mother. In the video, she wasn't the woman he had always known. The loving, protective mother who had kept him safe from the world's dangers. This woman was cold, calculating, and indifferent. As she stood there, the camera zoomed in on her face, her lips curling into a faint smirk. She spoke, her voice low and chilling. Jamal was never meant to be the hero. He was always meant to be part of the plan. And now, he'll learn what it really means to play the game. Jamal felt the blood drain from his face as the video ended. His mother had orchestrated everything from the beginning, pulling the strings behind the scenes. She hadn't been protecting him. She had been keeping him in the dark. But why? What had he missed? What was the bigger picture that he had been so desperate to expose? He replayed the video several times, hoping for some hint, some clue he had missed. But there was nothing. It was a message, a warning. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized how powerless he had become. But Jamal wasn't the kind of person who gave up easily. He had spent too many sleepless nights, too many hours researching, fighting for the truth. Even if his mother had betrayed him, even if the system he had been fighting against was too powerful to break, he couldn't stop now. He had to keep going. He wiped the sweat from his brow and stood up, his legs unsteady. The weight of the world seemed to be pressing down on him, but he couldn't afford to collapse. Not when there were still people who needed his help. He had to get to the bottom of this. He had to find out who was behind everything and expose it to the world. As he walked toward the alley exit, Jamal felt the faintest glimmer of hope. It wasn't over. Not yet. The syndicate, the lawyer, his mother, they had underestimated him. They had thought he was just a kid, a naive boy who didn't understand the world. But now he knew the truth. He knew what they were capable of, and he knew how to fight back. The first step was clear. He needed answers. Jamal turned on his phone again, scanning through his contacts, looking for someone who could help him. There was only one person left, Marcus. Marcus had been his ally from the start, even when it seemed like everything was falling apart. He was the one who had uncovered the lawyer's connections, who had shown him the cracks in the system. Jamal's hands trembled as he dialed Marcus's number. The phone rang twice before Marcus picked up. Jamal, what happened? I saw the video. Marcus stopped mid-sentence. Is it true? Your mom? Jamal took a deep breath. Yeah, it's true. She's been involved in all of this from the beginning. I don't know how deep it goes, but I'm going to find out. I can't stop now. People are counting on me. I'm with you, Marcus said firmly. You're not alone in this. I'll help you take them down. Jamal felt a surge of gratitude. He hadn't expected Marcus to stay by his side after everything that had happened. But the fact that he was still willing to help made all the difference. I need you to find everything you can about the syndicate, Jamal said. I need names, connections, everything. There's got to be a way to bring them down. I don't know how yet, but I will. I swear. Don't worry. I've got your back, Marcus replied. We'll figure this out together. Jamal's heart raced as he hung up the phone. He wasn't alone. There was still hope. But as he stood in the quiet, dimly lit alley, he realized something else. The fight he was about to face wouldn't just be against the syndicate or the airline. It would be against everything he had believed in, his own family, the people he trusted most. And yet, even in the face of that, Jamal refused to back down. He had come too far, and there was no turning back now. The next few weeks were a blur of late nights, research, and planning. With Marcus's help, Jamal slowly uncovered more and more about the syndicate's operations. They weren't just involved with the airline. This group had its hands in everything. Politics, media, finance. Nothing was off limits. Every door Jamal opened led to more questions, more revelations, but he knew that the deeper he dug, the more dangerous it would become. Still, he couldn't stop. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. He had to expose them all. And then one day, it happened. Jamal got an anonymous tip, an invitation to a secret meeting. Someone from the inside wanted to meet with him, to help him bring down the syndicate. But the moment he arrived, he realized something was off. The meeting had been a trap. The moment Jamal stepped into the room, the door slammed shut behind him, and the lights flickered. Before he could react, he was surrounded by men in suits, armed, silent, and determined. The lawyer was there too, standing in the back, a satisfied smirk on his face. "Well, Jamal," the lawyer said, stepping forward, "I have to admit, you've impressed me. But this is where your journey ends." But Jamal had a plan. He'd known this moment might come. As the men closed in on him, Jamal lunged forward, grabbing the device from his jacket pocket. It was a signal jammer, one he had spent weeks building with Marcus's help. With a few quick movements, he activated it, sending the entire room into chaos. The syndicate's control systems, their surveillance, their security, everything went down. The door burst open, and the authorities stormed in, led by a familiar face. Marcus. Jamal had outsmarted them all. The trap had been set for the syndicate, and now the tables had turned. As the police moved in to arrest the syndicate members, Jamal took one last look at the lawyer. "You lost. You thought you could control everything, but you underestimated one thing: people who won't stop fighting for what's right." The lawyer's face twisted in anger, but there was nothing left for him to do. His empire was crumbling. Jamal walked out of the building with Marcus by his side, the weight of the last few weeks slowly lifting. The truth had been exposed. The syndicate was no more. And though the journey had been filled with betrayals and shocking revelations, Jamal had emerged victorious. As they stepped into the sunlight, Jamal felt a sense of peace wash over him. He had lost a lot, his family, his innocence. But he had gained something far more valuable: the truth. And sometimes, that was all you needed to change the world. It wasn't just about winning. It was about standing up, no matter what the cost.